Hello and welcome to another episode of the Sinead Said podcast. This week we have Jaime Zuckerman, who is psychologist, narcissist abuse expert, and relationship coach. And the first thing that I notice about you is how passionate you are about this area of narcissism. And I just wondered, was there a backstory to how passionate you are about this topic?
So first, it happens. When I opened up a practice, outpatient private practice, I started seeing a lot of this, and I started seeing these common patterns. And I realized there was really not that much out there in terms of actual day-to-day experiences. The definitions were out there, the clinical terms, but nobody was really talking about what this actually looks like. And if they were, nobody knew that anyone else went through it. They thought it was just them because it's so bizarre and so just crazy making that you really just keep it to yourself. And then one of my dearest, closest friends, I kind of had a front row seat to her divorce and what she was going through. And it was absolutely horrific. And so I felt compelled to just almost as like preventative medicine, because you really need to educate people on the red flags so that they don't get into this, because once they're in it, it's really difficult to get out. So I'm super passionate about educating people and giving them the tools and the strategies they need to not get into it, but even if they're in it, to be able to get out of it.
And I'm just interrupting this podcast to talk about our amazing sponsors, BetterHelp, who have sponsored the Sinead Says podcast from day one. And you all know how much I love therapy and vouch for it all the time. It has been completely life-changing for me. It has really upped my game. And for me, it just really helped me with my performance, my self-belief, setting boundaries to be the most successful person that I can be. And it's also really helpful for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. And it just empowers you to be the best version of yourself. So BetterHelp is convenient, flexible, affordable, and all online. And all you need to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and find a time that suits you. So to get 10% off your first month, just visit betterhelp.com/Sinead. That is betterhelp.com/Sinead. So for everyone listen, I feel like as well, like narcissist, these words are like thrown around a lot as well. And could you give us like a clear definition of what a narcissist is?
Sure. So somebody who is a narcissist, meaning they have narcissistic personality disorder, means that it is a pervasive personality style. It interferes with every single domain of their life. So it's not somebody who maybe is just a jerk in a relationship and non-committal, but they're genuine in other areas. This is somebody who is in all domains of their life narcissistic, which can look like they're charming, but behind closed doors, it is extremely abusive. So signs of narcissistic personality disorder, one of the key ones is complete lack of empathy. So they may appear that they have empathy, but they don't. They're kind of faking that or modeling somebody else's empathy. So there's a lack of empathy, lack of accountability. They will not take accountability for any of their behaviors. In fact, if they hurt you, it's your fault. You deserved it. You went back to them. So it must be okay that what they're doing, it's your fault for coming back to them. It's your fault for their abuse, for their anger. You made them upset. Grandiose ideas. So thinking that they are entitled to power and money and success, whatever that looks like for them, but with very little effort behind it. They just think that they're kind of entitled to these things. They have very big ideas, but they're empty ideas. There's no real follow-up to it. A lot of manipulation. So lying and what we call gaslighting, which I'm sure we'll get into. So they don't care what they have to do or who they have to hurt to get their needs met. That is the only focus that they have, to get what they want when they want it. If they happen to hurt you in the process, so be it. You were in the way, figuratively. You were in the way. They did what they needed to do. So there's no accountability, no empathy.
So like the backstory of what I know of why people are or become narcissists, I think what I picked up on it was they basically have no way to self-soothe. They don't love themselves or have any sense of self, and they always need to be validated by someone else because they can't validate themselves. And what I read was just sometimes it comes from having both narcissistic parents or having a parent who's maybe overprotective and doesn't allow them their own independence of
Mm-hmm.
and not doesn't allow them to have their own self. So they kind of develop these traits. So what would you say is like the reasons behind, why someone turns out to be a narcissist?
Yeah, so I'll start with kind of growing up developmentally. You don't need to have a narcissistic parent or parents to become a
Mhm.
narcissist. What you need to have most often is a toxic, unpredictable upbringing. So you could have a parent that is an alcoholic, you could have a parent that has other mental health issues, you could have a parent that is completely neglectful. You could have parents, like you said, who are either so overbearing that the child has no voice, can't speak, has no opinions, and something like that, or the opposite. Nothing they ever do is good enough. Everything they do is crap, and no matter how hard they try, it doesn't matter. Um, so in those situations, what the child does is children are very resilient. And fortunately or unfortunately, that resiliency in those situations leads them to develop these coping strategies, which as a child works very well for them given their
Mhm.
circumstances. It helps them survive this upbringing. Oftentimes it's this protective mechanism where, let's say, I'm going to shut down completely and I am never going to give you kind of any emotions. I'm just going to be shut down. I'm going to hurt you before you hurt me. Or
Mhm.
those standards that were put on me that nothing ever is good enough, I'm going to project that and put that onto you. So they develop all these strategies which get them through childhood. The problem is when those strategies still exist after their toxic environment changes. So when they become an adult, when they have their own life, when they're out of the house, um, you often see that. You see these coping strategies now turn into personality disorders. And this isn't all the time, but this is kind of generally how this comes to be. But there is one other situation where this does happen, and that is this golden child syndrome, where the child can do no wrong. There are zero consequences for their actions. The laws, the rules, which is very common with narcissists, the laws and the rules don't apply to them. They are above them. They're above
Mhm.
labels. They're above rules. All of that. So this child grows up thinking nothing they ever do is wrong. There's no consequences, so they can do whatever they want. They can hurt whoever they want. People's feelings and opinions are irrelevant. They don't matter. Narcissists look at people as interchangeable objects, right? So they just kind of look
Yeah.
at them to get that, as you said, that validation or that supply that they need.
Yeah. And does that mean that they just cannot give that to themselves? They can't, is that like why they have to look elsewhere? They have to control every situation, every person because they can't validate their own selves. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's different schools of thought on that. And there's different types of narcissists, but the kind of covert narcissists that we're talking about, um, you'll hear people say the mask, right? They wear a mask and then the mask falls off. If they feel at any point somebody has seen the real them, which they hate themselves. There's so much shame involved with a narcissist. So they will do everything they can to protect themselves from ever reaching that shame. And so when they are not validated by somebody or somebody happens to figure them out, that's where you see that narcissistic rage. It's like they will never be able to access that shame. And if they feel it for a second, that rage comes out, or the silent treatment or something to deflect that, which is why, like you said, they're constantly going to other people to fill that, to kind of put a huge buffer between them and that shame. And they need that in order to exist.
So in terms of like relationships, because there's obviously other different types of relationships. We have like, parents as narcissists, and we also have um partners in relationships. And I would say that is when I put up my question box for narcissists, it was like insane. And like so many women and like men as well sending me messages
Yeah.
of their stories. And I just was like, oh my God, so many people are affected. I would say
Yes.
it's like the most questions I've ever gotten,
Yep.
and a lot of people really, really struggling, rather being in a relationship with one, trying to deal with one, maybe having
Yep.
a child to one. And it's mental. I just had I just felt so bad even reading the messages. I was just like, oh my God. So like, that's why what you're doing is very good because you're obviously showing the signs straight away, because obviously they can be quite what's the word when they're a bit, well, I suppose it's love bombing, and they're very
Yep.
charming at the start.
Yes.
So What would you say are the things to look out for within dating, relationships, that sort of way?
Sure. So this is for dating. It also can be for friendships. Parents
Mhm.
obviously are a different situation, but um, so I tell people, and and I get some pushback for this, but I stand by this. I am sure people met on their first date, fell in love, and are married, but they're part of this 0.001% category. If you are going on a date with somebody and you hear, "You're my soulmate. Where have you been? I've been waiting for you my entire life," and you hear that in the very beginning of the relationship, run. Run. Because here's the thing, as good and as amazing as that feels, there is no way that somebody can say, "You're my soulmate," when they know nothing about you,
Mhm.
right? So it feels good, but it's not accurate, right? So that's number one. Number two, if they say something to you in addition to that, so it's not just one of these things, it's a whole bunch of things, but so you're my soulmate, where have you been my whole life? They start talking about marrying you. They start talking about future plans, which we call future faking. They make these big promises to you. We're going to move in together. We're going to go to Paris. We're going to get engaged. And none of it happens. But they do this to kind of bait you to get you in. If you find yourself talking about your deepest, darkest secrets, your biggest vulnerabilities, your upbringing that was toxic on date one, two, three, they are doing that on purpose to get that information from you, to store it, to kind of use it against you later, figure out what your vulnerabilities are, figure out what your weaknesses are, but doing it in a way in that love bombing stage, because that's where they get you to trust them completely. The sex is amazing. They're texting you constantly. I miss you. I want to see you. I love you. Gifts and vacations. And it's not just, wow, I met this person and we clicked. It feels like a tidal wave. Like you are swept off your feet. You don't know what happens. So it's extremely intense and it feels really good. And that's why people get so sucked into it. You can't really blame them. So it's important to look for those signs. And even though it may feel good, realistically, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And then like furthermore, because to be honest, like how are you meant to go away from that? How are you meant to say, oh no, you're too good? Because a lot of people then are going into the relationship, they are charmed, like essentially they're just charmed into it. And then what happens next? Like when do we start? Because obviously they cause so much damage and so much hurt. And I've seen in my messages how much pain they've caused. Like
Yeah.
where does it begin? Like the control and behavior, and like how does it
Yeah.
show up in the relationship?
So excellent question. So I like to describe it as a leaking faucet, right? So it drips, it drips, it drips, and you don't really notice it until your entire kitchen is flooded. So it's very strategic, manipulative, and it's very subtle at first. These kind of subtle digs, like, oh, I met your friend Jamie from college. I there's just something about her. I don't really see you guys being friends. I don't really trust her. I don't know what it is. Or, your parents, are they always this over involved? You really need to have some space between them and you. Or things like, I know, you're so pretty without makeup. I like when you're plain. You don't need to show off your body like that. Like you look. So these little subtle things that individually, with outside of this context, may mean nothing. But all of these things taken together is this slow buildup of slowly isolating you so that when they do abuse you, you don't have anybody around you or anyone objective to bounce this off of. They slowly start to make you believe this reality that they're creating for you. And it's so subtle. And then what they do, it's something called intermittent reinforcement, which is just a fancy way of saying this kind of push, pull, like an addiction. So they'll slowly withdraw the love bombing, pepper in some of those subtle abuse, beginning of abuse, right? But then give you a little bit more love bombing.
So you get these intermittent spurts of dopamine, which gives you this immediate pleasure and then it's taken away. And you never know when you're going to get it. And you have no idea what caused it to get it in the first place. So they kind of trap you in this addiction pattern almost where it's really difficult to get out of. And then once they do that, once you're hooked, then the abuse starts to escalate even more and more and more.
And in terms of like the abuse escalating a bit more, like what does that involve? Like obviously they've been isolated now, and it's a bit more like complete controlling. I actually have seen it being played out as well. And it just sounds exactly like that as well. And then because they've done so much love bombing and so much nice things, they always have this, you know, this fight for them. Like, yeah, but he does this and he does that and he
Correct.
does this, but he did this. And then, but I'm like, are you missing the point here of like all the other things that he's doing?
Yes.
Or she?
So they're very good at gaslighting you, which means, you know, you'll bring a situation to their awareness. You'll say, why did you X, Y, and Z? Or you said this, and they'll say, no, no, I didn't. You're crazy. I don't know what you're talking about. You're crazy. Just like you said your dad was, right? That's when they pull out that information, right? That you gave them early on. And they will make you feel like your perception of what happens, of the argument you just had, is so inaccurate. And then you start questioning yourself. Did it really happen? Maybe it didn't happen. Or they'll make you feel that it's your fault. Well, if you didn't scream at me, that I wouldn't have punched the wall. And you start to believe that you're responsible for their abusive actions. And so they'll pepper in the love bombing. And so it's this really like unsettling, confusing mix. And by doing that, that's how they control you. Mm-hmm. It's all about control, but not just control of your behaviors and where you go and what you wear and things like that, but it's control of your emotions and your thoughts. They want to be able to have access to that so that they can manipulate your entire sense of self. That's why when people finally get out of these relationships, they'll say, men and women, they'll say, no, I feel like a shell of my former self. I don't know who I am.
And if anyone's like sort of thinking that they are with a narcissist and they're kind of like, oh, I don't know, like what's a good way to try and tell if they're.
Yep. So the easiest thing that I tell people is set a boundary and see what happens. If you're dating someone, I think maybe they're a narcissist, tell them you can't go out one night, break plans with them. Or, tell them that you want to do something different. Set a boundary of some sort. See how their response is. If they say, oh, can you come over? They tell you last minute, can you come over? And you say, no, I'm too tired. I'm just going to go to bed tonight. It may be really hard to do because you really want to see them. But if somebody really cares about you, that's not going to do anything to the relationship. If anything, it's going to make them want to see you more, right? But a narcissist will respond to that with rage or with a silent treatment, or they'll just completely just ghost you. You'll never hear from them again. And then they'll pop back in 6 months later. They'll tell you you're a terrible person, you ruined their night, a whole host of things. So that's definitely one way that you can kind of, amongst other things, obviously, but that's one strategy that I tell people to use often. The other is tell them that you think it's moving too fast and you want to take it a little bit slower. Again, if somebody really cares about you, that's not gonna push them away. See what they do when that happens. See if they respect your need for space. Do they agree with it and give you your space? Or do they give you your space for a day and then start contacting you again? Or just avoid that altogether and ignore it altogether and just act as if you never said it.
I feel like sometimes as well, like it could be mixed up with, someone who's very insecure. So like someone who's very insecure would obviously maybe do bit of silent treatment, bit of stuff like that. Do you think, is there a way to distinguish if someone is just insecure? Because I know that as well, like I don't know, actually I'm going to ask this question as well, but like narcissists, I think people can be insecure and then move forward and become more aware and become more secure and become a better partner. But then do narcissists are they ever aware of who they are?
Yes, they fully know. Well, it's interesting. So they know exactly what they're doing. People say, well, do they know that they're doing this? Yes, they know exactly what they're doing. It's very calculated. It's very manipulative. They know they're doing it. They don't care if it's hurting you, as long as they get their needs met, whatever those needs are, whether it's sex, money, companionship, breakfast, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. They know what they're doing. Somebody who is insecure, let's say, or somebody who has unhealthy patterns, and let's say when their insecurity button is pushed, they tend to back away or shut down. So it looks like they're giving you the silent treatment, or they're purposely not talking to you. The difference would be that person, when it's called to their attention, they genuinely don't want their behavior to be interpreted as being pushing the other person away. right? So they will have the awareness and understanding that what they're doing is hurting the other person. They don't want that. And hopefully they will work to change it. A narcissist knows exactly what they're doing. They don't think that there's no insecurity, right? Outwardly, there's no insecurity. So they would never push someone away because they feel insecure. They'll push someone away because they want the other person to feel insecure.
Yeah, because it's a way of manipulating, because they know that the other
Exactly.
person will come running back.
Exactly.
Oh, okay,
Exactly.
okay, yeah. And then, so from what I've heard
Also
as well,
someone who's insecure won't show these other things. There won't be this love bombing. There won't be this manipulation. There won't be this gaslighting. It'll look different. You know, somebody who's insecure isn't vindictive.
Yeah. And then if people are, there is a lot of people from what I've known anyway, that are rather in these relationships, or they are like recovering. And, you know, what is your best tips to get out? Because I feel like a lot of people are really, really stuck. And to be honest, I feel like a lot of people are scared.
Oh, they're
which
petrified.
is really scary. Yeah.
Yeah. They're scared to leave because they don't know who they are. They've been convinced that they can't live without this person. This person defines who they are, defines their opinions. And, you know, when people leave narcissistic relationships, that period of time where they leave or they serve divorce papers, that's the most dangerous time. So they have every reason to be scared, because that's the highest time, that's the highest risk for physical abuse and for violence. So they're right to be scared. Because it's very scary, because, you know, especially when there's children involved, they're very scared sometimes for their lives. And financially, they've been financially abused for so long, meaning, you know, they were either not allowed to work, right? So they have no earning potential. They either worked constantly because they were the breadwinners, but they never had access to their money. They don't know where their assets are. They don't know what investments they have. They literally don't know their bank accounts. They leave, they have no access to money. So that's also a really big issue as well.
So what are the steps going forward if they wanted to leave? They'd have to sort of start somewhere, like, before they even take that full plunge, I'd say.
Yep. So assuming they can do this safely and they have access to it, I always recommend individual therapy if you can go. If you have to lie and say it's because because of some other reason, doesn't matter, lie and go. Do not bother with couples therapy. I tell people, do not go to couples therapy with a narcissist. You will feel invalidated. They will manipulate the situation. Go by yourself. Find somebody who is equipped to talk about this, who understands the nuances, because what you don't want is a therapist saying, well, it sounds like they're really trying. They're not. They're trying to manipulate you back. So you really want to be careful with that. You want to identify somebody outside that is a friend or a family member, even if it's people that you haven't spoken to in a long time because you've been isolated from them. Trust me when I tell you they're concerned about you. And if you reach out to them, chances are they're going to be thrilled that you did. So find somebody that you have that's objective, it's almost like you're in the matrix, and you need somebody on the outside to be able to pull you out, because you don't even realize the abusive bubble that you're in until you're out of it. That's why it's so hard to get out. So you need somebody on the outside to help pull you out. If you can, and you can do it safely, start setting aside money. It doesn't even matter if it's $1 a day, doesn't matter. Start to set aside money, because even if you have $50, it still gives you this sense of control that you at least have $50 when you leave. You want to consult. A lot of attorneys will do a consultation for free. Consult a divorce attorney. You want to know what your rights are. You want to know, custody wise, if you have children, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, because you don't want to, because narcissists are brutal during divorces. They will drag you through court. They will attempt to take custody, even though they never gave the child attention once growing up. So things like that. If there's no children, and they're, even if there are children, but just generally speaking, if you want to get out and you're in the process of getting out, you want to, if you can, and it's hard with children, but you want to go what's called no contact. You block them on everything, every social media, your email, your phone number, you change your locks, you block their friends, their family members, everybody, so that they cannot contact you. And if they do somehow figure it out, because sometimes they do, you do not pick up, you do not respond. If they come to your place of work, you call the police. you ignore attempts of communication by their family members or their friends. We call them flying monkeys, the people that kind of don't know the whole story, but, they've convinced that you're crazy. They've convinced their friends and family you're the crazy one. You're the one that drove them away. You have a drug problem, you have an alcohol problem, you have mental health issues. And so they will say that. Don't even bother to try to clear your name. It's best if you just say nothing, because eventually it will die out. But don't even bother going there. People say like, should I, I want to clear my name. Don't, This is not the time to do it.
Yeah. And when they're out, it'd be nice to hear some success stories from people that have came through it and came out. Because if they're listening to this right now, that sounds so scary. And, sometimes you can't see the light until you're out. And do you have any success stories?
Can I tell you that nobody has ever asked me that question?
Really?
Yes. That just threw me off guard. I love that question. Okay. Yes. I'm excited to talk about the success story. Yes.
Yeah. Cause I was like, we need to show them the light. We need to show them like, it's okay. And you can come out the other side. Cause sometimes people go into recovery and like, we need the other side. We need to know, like, if you're listening to this and you're with a narcissist, that there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Absolutely.
And you're going to tell us.
Yes. Thank you for asking that. I love this question. So one of the things that I say routinely to people who are going through this or are kind of what we call, there's also post-separation abuse, meaning with a narcissist, the abuse unfortunately does not end just because the relationship ends. Mm-hmm. They will come back in, birthdays, holidays, they will attempt to ruin them for you, whatever the case may be. Once a person sees the blueprint of a narcissist behavior, because the craziest part about all of this that I think I find most, I hate saying fascinating, but I don't know another word, is that no matter how different the behaviors of a narcissist are identical. Down to the smallest subtle nuanced behaviors, they are identical. So once you figure out the blueprint of a narcissist behavior, and let's say you hear stories on, other people on social media talking about their experiences, and you realize not only are you not alone, but the behaviors are so unbelievably predictable. When you realize that, there's this kind of switch that goes off. And it's my favorite part about treating this horrific, journey that people are on. But when they have that moment of like, oh my God, wait, hold on. And they start to piece things together, and it gives them this huge sense of relief in a weird way, that they realize it's not them. It never was them. That meaning it was never their fault. And the behavior now becomes predictable. And when you can predict something, now you feel in control. And so they get this sense of empowerment and this sense of control. It's still difficult, but when they'll say to me, I did this and this, and I knew it, he was going to do this, or she was going to do that, and I called it, and I was able to do this, this, and this to prevent it from affecting me. It gives them this clarity and this control that they realize they're going to be okay. And it's like this definitive period in their treatment where it happens. Again, not that they don't go back and forth after that, they do, but there's this clarity that happens. And so that is a big thing. And that I think is kind of the start. Leaving is the first step. Then that's kind of the next start in the journey. What I will tell you is that people that have gotten out, that I've worked with, who have been in narcissistic relationships, I'm not going to say always, but I really haven't worked with anybody who has gotten right back into another one.
Yeah.
It may be hard to pick out healthy people because they're used to unhealthy patterns, because that's familiar to them from growing up or whatever. But they're so aware of the behaviors that they almost go so much to the extreme that they'll say, he kept opening the door for me. Like, is he a narcissist? And like, no, he's trying to be nice. And so you want to kind of work them back to the middle. So they almost overcompensate and are like hyper aware of the behaviors. But I have tons of success stories of people leaving, of people staying out. And what I also tell people is I think on average, it's about 7 times it takes to finally leave for good. So if you leave and come back and leave and come back, because they're really good at, we call it hoovering, really good at sucking you back in. try not to beat yourself up and, feel bad about yourself. Understand that even though you went back, it's still forward movement towards getting out. Because sometimes you need to leave, come back to then finally have that epiphany and that realization that you can do this.
So here I want to introduce my own online course, The Brave Way. It's a 21-day online meditation course that I have created to help people build a habit of meditating each day, gain mental clarity, shift their mindset, increase their confidence and their self-love. And I know what you might be thinking, like meditation, that's not really for me, but trust me, I used to think the exact same, but this course is designed to make meditation accessible for everyone, regardless of your experience level. And plus, with this added subconscious work, manifestation and visualization meditations and self-work, you'll be working on uncovering your true self, manifesting your deepest desires, and removing any blocks or resistance to self-love and self-belief. And if you sign up today and use the code SHANEAD-SAYS10 and check out, you will get 10% off, and I promise you won't regret it. Yeah. And there was a lot of people, when I was asking the question box, they obviously know narcissists, they maybe were involved or their family members, and they were like, I actually really care about this person, but can I have them in my life? Can I manage it? Or even someone who has kids together, how do you manage that? Because obviously you can't do no contact with someone that you have a child with, or if they're your brother or your family member, I suppose it's the best thing for the start of it is the awareness and knowing that their behaviors won't affect you because you can see them, I suppose. But is that what you would recommend if you're going to deal with them?
So there's it depends. It really depends on the situation, on the need to communicate and the level that you feel you need to communicate. If it's with an ex where you have children, you only communicate about the kids, and it's always in writing. And it's only facts, no emotions, no opinions, no nothing, just facts and only about the children. Anything else you don't respond to. You want to be, we call it gray rock. You want to be as boring as humanly possible so they get no supply from you. That is the best way to have a narcissist kind of leave you be. Narcissists, it is highly unlikely they will ever change. They see no need. It in their mind works for them. They see no problem with it. If you expect the dynamic with a narcissist to change, it will not. So if you choose to stay in the life of somebody who's a narcissist, understand that you will always have to deal with this. And maybe you can figure out ways to tolerate it better. But the problem with that is the more you kind of stop, the more you're still intertwined with a narcissist, the more you go back, make up, the behavior and the abuse starts to escalate. So you have to be very careful about that as well. But when people say, but I care about this person and I love this person, I mean, that's because we have empathy, we have concern, we have, we're human, we have feelings. With a narcissist, they are blocked in that capacity. They don't have empathy. They have feelings, they have, but shame and guilt, they bury very, very deep, but they are unable to maintain a connection. They're unable to empathize or put themselves in somebody else's shoes. It's a really tough person to be close with. So people, I tell, set extreme boundaries, whatever that is for you. Just make sure whatever boundary you set, you can commit to keeping it 100% of the time. Otherwise, you give that push-pull and the behavior you're trying to stop will actually increase and get worse.
I'm trying to think as well, because because they're obviously good at mimicking empathy.
Yep.
So they can almost fake it. So it's so easy to get trapped into this.
Correct.
So I would know the answer to this, but is there any, how can you see that they don't have empathy? How can you if they're faking it, it's going to be so hard. Is there some sort of test or something that you would see? Maybe they don't cry at the TV advert that's really sad, or I don't know.
So, I think the best way, here's the thing. At first, because we're not used to people not having empathy, right? We're not used to people not caring about, looking at us as an object, an inanimate object that serves a function to validate them and make them feel better about themselves. And then when they don't need us anymore, they put us on the shelf. So in the beginning, I mean, you probably won't know.
Yeah.
What will tell you is after they do something that's hurtful or harmful or sneaky or manipulative, or they lie or they cheat, whatever, does their behavior change after they realize that they've hurt you?
Mm.
And if it doesn't, and it's repetitive amongst other things, it's not just one behavior. It's a whole host of other behaviors, the controlling, the manipulative, all of that. So if they do something harmful and you tell them that it was harmful and you tell them how you feel and that their behavior is resulting in this feeling for you and it's affecting your relationship, it's affecting your dynamic, you're going to get either gaslighting, which is no, you're crazy. Why are you always getting mad at me? You're always getting mad at me. All you do is get mad at me. And before you know it, the whole entire situation has been turned this way. And now you're defending yourself for something you didn't even do. They're very, very good at that. Or you'll get narcissistic rage. They'll freak out or they'll get up and just leave. So their response to that will be disproportionate to the situation.
Yeah.
That's how you'll know.
It's a lot to take in, but
yeah,
I hope, I've got just a few, I won't keep you too long because I've got about
no, you're good.
13 minutes left, but I just had a few questions from the audience. And to be honest, we kind of did cover loads anyway. This was one for me actually. Is there different levels of narcissists? Is there different types of narcissists?
Yeah. So there's different types of narcissists, but with the levels. So if you look at narcissism on a continuum, right? So, we all have narcissistic traits, right? Mm-hmm. That come up for us at certain times. Like, when we talk about something that we know well, or when we're in our element, right? Or, if we're a competitive athlete and we're playing a sport, like we may be in that kind of zone, right? The difference is that we are able to shift it on and off when it's appropriate to the situation. And we also don't have that lack of empathy and that manipulation and, that grandiose sense of self that we think we're better than everyone. The rules don't apply to us. Mm-hmm. People can be extremely confident, even cocky. That doesn't mean they're a narcissist. And it doesn't even mean that that's narcissistic traits. So narcissistic personality disorder does not have levels. It's kind of is or it isn't, but people can have mm-hmm. features of a personality disorder. So for example, let's say you grow up in a toxic upbringing, right? And so you model patterns, let's say, of a parent who is a narcissist. I see this a lot actually, where I'll have a patient come to me where, in the beginning, they have these narcissistic qualities about them, but there's something a little bit different. So there's a difference between somebody who has narcissistic behaviors that are learned patterns of behavior that they can unlearn the patterns versus somebody who is a narcissist who has this deep rooted shame and everything compensates for that. And they're purposely manipulative and they're purposely vindictive. Even if it's hurting you, they don't care. Somebody who has narcissistic patterns, when you tell them what their behaviors are and they're harming you, they don't want to hurt you. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the key difference. But as far as different types of narcissists, so there's covert narcissists, which is oftentimes what I'm working with people on dealing with. So they're charming, they're outgoing, even philanthropic. They are well-to-do people in the community, well-known, well-liked. And then behind closed doors, they're extremely abusive, verbally, emotionally, sexually, financially, to the people closest to them. But they're really, really good at hiding that. Mm-hmm. And then you have people who are more kind of these outwardly grandiose, malignant narcissists, where it's this, what you're getting. It's like in your face constantly all the time. Mm-hmm. There's no deliberate effort to hide it. There's also narcissists that will constantly kind of put themselves in a victim role. Mm-hmm. So that they're always the victim, all my exes are crazy. Everybody always leaves me, or, everyone always gets mad at me. And so it's still so self-focused. But they put themselves in the role as a victim so that people feel bad for them. And that's that supply that they get from other people. Yeah. So they'll feign illnesses to kind of get that supply, especially during a breakup. All of a sudden they'll call you and say, I'm in the hospital having a heart attack. to get that supply from you.
I'm like, oh, that sounds familiar of a lot of stories I've heard. Like, oh dear. So this question was just from someone who is, I won't read out the whole question, but I'll get the gist of it. But basically, where is it now? It was her mother is in a narcissistic relationship, and she's like, it's very, very hard for me to watch. Like, I've tried so much to help her get out of it, and then he just love bombs her, and then the next thing he's like showing her up in front of everyone, calling her embarrassing and all this or whatever. And she was just like, what do? I just feel so, she's like, I've cut contact, but then he still even, comes up to me on my birthday, calls me on my events, like as you said as well. So this is the daughter. So like, how can you support someone? Because it's so hard, because like they're only going to make their own decisions. So you can't, and then that just tears these people apart.
Yes. So this is a really, really difficult situation. My advice is, if you are in a situation where you're watching somebody be abused in this narcissistic relationship and they keep going back and leaving and going back, and it's really frustrating because you feel like it's like you're on a hamster wheel with them, right? And I see this all the time. The best thing to do, as difficult as it may be, is to still be there for them, because at some point, hopefully, they're going to leave and they're going to need you. And it's more likely than not that they'll leave if they have that person, like I talked about, being objective on the outside that can pull them out and say, no, they're going to call you. Remember, it's your anniversary. They're going to call you. It's your birthday. Remember that. They're going to either call to make you really happy, or they're going to call and they're going to start with you to make you really sad, so that they have ownership of your mind and you're thinking about them on your special day. So you need that outside person. So even though it's frustrating, and you can still set boundaries with the person, but still let them know, like, you're there for them, because they are going to need you.
And it must be so hard as well, when you're just like, I've been there as well, just watching someone be
it's horrible.
abused.
Horrible.
But there is going to be a point, and I think like things like this, like awareness, and maybe like, what if you could give some books to people as well on narcissism? I know I learned a lot from the Laws of Human Nature. They had like a big section on narcissism that really explained it really well. So, even for the friends of these people, they can like maybe read about it and get educated and be like, oh, look at this. Do you want to have a look? And like, it's a good way to sort of put it on them, I suppose.
So I actually think some of the most helpful, my personal opinion, I think some of the most helpful resources are other survivor stories, because, and you can find that on any kind of, make sure it's, a true mental health professional who specializes in this, but, they'll have stories of people they'll talk about, they'll have people, on podcasts, things like that. Listen to survivors' stories, because you're going to be able to relate really well to that. Not that you use it for therapy, but just hearing that somebody else went through this and that they're on the other side of it can be so empowering, and you don't feel alone. Because one of the things about narcissistic abuse is it's so super hidden, because it's so subtle and manipulative and just totally just crazy making, that half the time they don't even realize that they're being abused, and it's just always been this way. And when they start to realize there's abuse, and they start to connect the dots, it's very jarring. And so it's helpful to hear survivors on the other side, when you have this realization of, that entire relationship wasn't real. They never loved me. They don't love my children. This was all a lie. And when you invest so much time and energy and effort, and as the person watching it invest so much time, energy, and effort trying to help you, it's very jarring. And so I always recommend people listening to survivor stories, again, not for therapy, but just to kind of give them that confidence and that validation that they're not crazy, and that there is a way out of it. Like you said, there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. People are like, do they know they're narcissists? A lot of people are asking, are they capable of love? But I think you just answered that there now, that they're not.
They're not. And I say this often too, because I get a lot of pushback for this. As a psychologist, it takes a lot for me to say that somebody can't love you in the way that you and I can love, or that somebody is really, it's highly unlikely they're going to make any type of meaningful change. And yes, they know they're doing it. It's not stigmatizing. It just is that those are the symptoms of it. And so it's very, like I said, it's very jarring, because we instinctively think that people are, inherently good. And so when you hear these things that happen, it's very kind of, you don't really know what to do with it. It's very confusing. I do this for a career, and when I hear some of these stories, I'm still sometimes like, wait, what? It's crazy making. So yeah, no, they are not capable of love in the way that you and I are. They quote, love somebody only to the extent that that person can give them what they need at any given moment. If they can give them what they need, whether it's money, sex, whatever, then in that moment, they will act as if they love them. But once they get that need filled, that person no longer there's no purpose for them. So they kind of don't exist anymore.
And in terms of this, right, say if you were listening to this and that some person was listening, they were like, oh my God, I think I'm a narcissist. Or would a narcissist never be aware of that? Never. They would just
so
like,
no.
A
narcissist, they may hear it and say like, yeah, I do that, but like, that's not me. It's like the labels don't apply to them. So it's almost like a narcissist being labeled a narcissist is almost beneath them in a way. Like they would never consider themselves in a category with other people, because they're better than that. That's not what they're doing. They're hurting you because you deserve to be hurt, because you interfered with their workday, or you bothered them while they were watching TV, or you cooked them a horrible dinner after they spent all day at work. They won't look at that as manipulative. They'll look at that as, you deserve the behavior you're getting, that this is your fault.
Well, to finish up, let's tell them that there is light at the end of the tunnel. You have so many amazing clients and everything that has gone through it, and it's not your fault. I suppose that's what you probably always say to everyone, like, it's not your fault. And if you think you've got some warning signs here of narcissism abuse, then please contact, a therapist and get as much help as you need. And also Jamie here has a great page on her Instagram. You also have podcasts. And where can people find you exactly?
My Instagram is Dr.Z_psychologist, and my website is drjaimezuckerman.com. And then my Instagram, my link tree is on there, so you can see articles, my books, podcasts, workshops, and just a whole bunch of resources on this.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. And if you've got any questions to the listeners out there, and let us know what you thought, and I will see you next week. So thank you.
Thank you.